Welcome to a very special edition of the Sharp Football Show. It's wild card round. It is the NFL playoffs. We are jacked up to be breaking these games down for you here over the course of the next hour or so. We've got NFL expert Pamela Maldonado. She's going to be sharing some of her favorite bets and props for the Commanders game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is the Sunday night football game. We also have our referee expert Joe Gibbs, who's going to be breaking down the couple of games. He's going to be breaking down the Monday night game, which got moved obviously from California to Glendale, Arizona. And then he's also going to be breaking down one other game, the Pittsburgh Steelers versus Baltimore Ravens big game on Saturday night. So, I mean, right now, I think we're all probably feeling pretty lucky about the way that these playoffs are headed for us. We had a great college football playoff game last night. Very close, very competitive game. We've got another game tonight that should be a ton of fun with Ohio State, and they're playing for their opportunity to go to the championship, and they're laying right now 6 points against the Texas Longhorns. And Pam might actually touch on that game as well in her breakdown. On Tuesday, you heard from our college betting expert, Ryan McChrystal, about his opinion and his take on the Ohio State game. Now, if you missed that, guess what? Earlier today, I posted on X about that game as well. You can go find my analysis there under Sharp Football as the handle. There's Ryan McChrystal's long, lengthy article where he breaks down both sides of the ball and proffers up one of his best bets for that. Or if you would rather just go and you're following us on YouTube, go to our Tuesday show on YouTube. So if you want to have a shortcut to that, just go over to YouTube, search Sharp Football Analysis, go over to the live shows, and then you can find the Tuesday show where we broke down that game in great detail with Ryan McChrystal. So let me see what you guys are up to here. Make sure that you guys are chatting with us over on YouTube as well. I'll be seeing your comments here. I'll be reading some of those aloud. I'll be answering some of your questions as well. So if you guys want to participate in this fully interactive show, head on over to YouTube, search for Sharp Football Analysis. Make sure that while you're there, you subscribe to the show and you give us a thumbs up, like the show as well. And with that said, let's go ahead and get it started. All right, first things first, and I'm going to jump to the big rematch game. We've got several rematch games from earlier on in the season. Some of them were divisional rematches like the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game. But one of the big games we started the season with was a Friday night football extravaganza down in Brazil where the Philadelphia Eagles tangled with the Green Bay Packers in a high-scoring affair on a slippery surface with refs that were calling a bunch of penalties. But in this game here, where the Green Bay Packers take on the Philadelphia Eagles, I identified one critical aspect to this game that, in my opinion, could be the turning point as to whether or not the Philadelphia Eagles can win and cover this spread, which is currently sitting at 4.5 points, them being the favorite. And that is the Philadelphia Eagles must run the football more from 11 personnel. This is something that they do at around a league average rate, but they actually have one of the higher rates of running the football with multiple tight ends out on the football field. But there's a critical aspect to the Green Bay Packers run defense that I need to call out here. So let's go ahead and post that graphic on the screen for you guys to see. I've shared some of these graphics with you previously, but what you're going to notice here is that the efficiency, this is EPA per rush attempt allowed. The efficiency strong run defense is going to have higher defensive EPA per rush attempt. So you're going to be over on the right-hand side of the graphic or the top of the graphic if we're looking at the y-axis. So as an example, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the number one best run defense against 11 personnel runs. See, they're over on the far right with around plus 0.3 EPA per rush defensively. The Carolina Panthers are over there on the left at the bottom. They're the worst run defense against 11 personnel. So that's how the x-axis works. Obviously, the y-axis works in the same manner. What you will notice is where the Green Bay Packers sit, as I identified their logo with a box around them. They're in the top left of this entire graphic, which showcases the fact that if we're first going to look at the y-axis, they are the number 2 best defense against running back runs in 12 or 13 personnel, multiple tight end sets. You should know by now, 12 personnel means 2 tight ends out on the field, 13 personnel, 3 tight ends out on the field. So multiple tight end sets. They're the second best run defense against multiple tight end sets. And let me get into some of the statistics for what they are allowing on the ground there. This is since week 9, so the back half of the season. As I mentioned before, I like to address sort of the tail end of the season a little bit more. We're still about 10 weeks of data here, so it's not like we're shortchanging anything. But versus 2 tight end sets, here's where the Green Bay Packers rank. Number 2 in EPA per rush allowed. Number 1 in yards per carry allowed. They're allowing only 2.8 yards per carry against 2 tight end running back runs. Number 3 in yards before contact per run allowed. Only 0.23 yards before contact allowed. And they allow an explosive run on only 6% of runs, which is above average. Versus 11 personnel, however, if you look at this graphic, you can see that they are on the far left on the x-axis. And they're barely above the Carolina Panthers, which means they are the second worst team defending 11 personnel runs since week 9 over the back half of the season. And they are allowing 4.6 yards per carry, which is 24th in the NFL. They're allowing 1.73 yards before contact per run, which is 25th in the NFL. And they're allowing an explosive run rate on 10% of runs, which is 24th in the NFL. So they're literally moving from top 3 in pretty much all of those metrics down to bottom 10 in all of those metrics. And of course, EPA per rush, they have the largest move from number 2 to number 31, second best to second worst. Now, on early down running back runs, the Philadelphia Eagles use 11 personnel at the 18th highest rate, so just below league average at 45% of their runs. They're running from 2 tight end sets at the 8th highest rate on about 50% of their runs. Now, the Eagles themselves have similar splits offensively when they are running on early downs by tight end spacing. By tight ends out on the field. When they are using multiple tight ends out on the field, the Philadelphia Eagles' own offense ranks 15th in EPA per attempt and ranks 10th in yards per carry. They're getting 4.3 yards per carry when Philly runs from multiple tight end sets on early downs with a running back. However, when Philly is running from 11 personnel, they are averaging 6.3 yards per carry, which is the number 1 best in the NFL, and they are averaging plus 0.10 EPA per rush, which is number 1 in the NFL. So this is working both ways. For the Philadelphia Eagles themselves, they would be better served to run more from 11 personnel because their statistics are significantly better. They're the best rushing attack in the NFL. I'm scraping out third downs. We can remove, I think this removes fourth quarter as well, so garbage time. We're looking at the first 3 quarters on early downs. Philadelphia is the number 1 run offense in the league from 11 personnel. And they drop down to around 10 to 15 when they're running from 12 personnel, which is what they do. They also sometimes run from 13 personnel. So any of these multi-tight end sets that they're using. The Green Bay Packers, as I've indicated before, are the second best defense defending runs from multi-tight end sets, but the second worst defense defending runs from 11 personnel. So the Philadelphia Eagles, if they want to maximize Saquon Barkley, if they want to give themselves the best chance to win this game, all of their receivers are healthy right now. They've got a full complement of receivers that they could put out on the field. They must try to use more 11 personnel. They will have far more success attacking this Green Bay Packers run defense if they choose to do that. And trust me, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are aware of this. The key question is, will they actually take stock into it and implement it as much as they possibly should? But I'm pretty confident that they are aware of this data. So there you go, Philadelphia Eagles. That's a key statistic. I think it's going to be really make or break for them. If they're going to cover this spread, I think they could potentially win this game regardless. I know Christian Watson is a big loss for the Green Bay Packers in the passing attack. So without him, it's going to really put a lid on what Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers passing attack is going to be capable of doing here. How much will they try to rely on the ground game? We've talked ad nauseum about the Green Bay Packers and my disdain for their tendency to run the ball at too high of a rate with very little success. And that is exactly what could happen in this game. And it theoretically, I mean, the way that I'm envisioning this game playing out is the Green Bay Packers are going to take the ball. If they win the kickoff, they're going to take the ball. If the Eagles win the kickoff, they're going to defer. Green Bay starts with the ball. If Green Bay comes out with this run-oriented approach and are not productive, punt the ball, and then Philly can go down and score, the Green Bay Packers are playing from a position of weakness, and they're going to be trying to run the ball a little bit too much without Christian Watson, and things could really derail themselves. So it's incumbent upon Matt LaFleur and this Green Bay Packers attack to have a very good script to approach this game. Don't just take the ball. You have to have an aggressive script from your approach to this game to try to optimize your chances of scoring points early in this game, to hang around with the Philadelphia Eagles so they can't just sit on the run game. But from a Philadelphia perspective, you better be running a little bit more from 11 personnel. Exile says, this is gold. I appreciate that. Brett says, what, well, let me see. I'm trying to get used to this new platform. So the most recent comments are at the very bottom of here. Green Bay starts off running. This seems like an under game. If Green Bay starts off running, Jason's comment, I don't disagree, especially with the questions surrounding Jalen Hurts. I'm really curious from Nick Sirianni's perspective, how quickly he decides to come out and pass the ball and open this thing up, or if they're going to stick a little bit more with the ground game. I'm also really intrigued to see the overall play volume that exists in this game, because if you have Green Bay leaning into the run and you have Philadelphia leaning into the run, then that clock could be ticking, and it really is dependent upon whether or not these backs are getting any explosive chunk gains here, or whether they're picking up 3.5 to 4.5 yards per carry and simply moving the chains and repeat all the way down the field. So this game, in my opinion, probably will come down to which coach is willing to be more aggressive at and how successful they are on explosives, back and forth on both sides here. Exile says Eagles at home are a top 3 defense in points allowed. Not good for LaFleur's run obsession. Yes, I agree. I'm really intrigued to see what Matt LaFleur decides to do here. So that's the first NFC game of the entire weekend. It's really intriguing. I don't know if you guys sort of paid attention to the way the games were sequenced here, but Saturday's games, we've got Houston versus the LA Chargers. Kicks us off. Nightcap is Pittsburgh versus Baltimore. Sunday, the first game of the day, is Buffalo versus Denver. So we got all 3 AFC games are being tackled 1, 2, 3. And then we pivot over to the NFC to close out the weekend. Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, and then Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, and Monday Night Football. So that's the way the schedule's working. This Green Bay Packers versus the Philadelphia Eagles, the first NFC game of the weekend. The second NFC game of the weekend is the Washington Commanders versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Pam Maldonado has some breakdown and some player props that she likes on this game. So let's toss it over to Pam. Make sure that you guys are following her over on X. There's her handle. And let's see what she has to say about this one.
So last week I got a little bit click heavy, and you just fired on everything. It was week 18. Probably a little bit irresponsible. I thought I liked a lot of games. Didn't work out so well. This week, there's one game that I love. I liked others, but there's one game that I love, and so I'm focusing in on that. And there's a few things that I like between Washington and Tampa Bay, starting first with Bucs -3 against the Commanders. The Bucs, to me, have the edge in this matchup in every critical area, and it starts with Baker Mayfield. This season, he's been nothing short of, it's basically been a career renaissance for him. Mayfield has thrown 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns. Those are numbers that are eerily resemble that of Tom Brady's Super Bowl winning stats from the 2020 season. pinpoint accuracy, poise under pressure, clutch decision making. It's been a resurgence in his career. Now, largely it's because he's had a really good group of wide receivers, including Mike Evans, but it really is that himself, Baker Mayfield, he has that veteran leadership. He's playing with a lot of confidence. And because of that, the Bucs have a decisive advantage in this, especially in a high-pressure environment of playoff football. Rookie quarterbacks, 0-9 on the road in playoff games over the past decade. That's something Washington will have to overcome. Tampa Bay's offense isn't just an air attack anymore. That's really been a huge factor into the success of this Bucs team. You've got Bucky Irving, Bucs' first 1,000-yard rusher since the 2015 season. Irving has emerged, he's propelled, actually, Tampa's rushing offense from 31st last year to 4th in the league this season. Irving, consistency on the ground, it really complements Mayfield's aerial brilliance, and because of that, you have a balanced attack. It is so much harder to defend balanced attacks instead of one-dimensional offenses. That gives Tampa the unpredictability from defenders. That's tough to defend. So let's talk about the Commanders' vulnerabilities. Washington's pass defense, 27th against wide receivers. That's a glaring weakness when facing a weapon like Mike Evans. Evans' size, his route running skills, a nightmare matchup for a shaky secondary. Mayfield has thrived in exploiting these kinds of weaknesses all season long. If you combine that with the Commanders' struggles against play action, quick strike passes, and Tampa's offense could have a field day. Mayfield has been working on those quick strike passes. He's trying to let go of the ball faster than ever before, and he's doing well. It's improving each week. The story doesn't get much better for Washington's run defense. 30th in yards per carry allowed and 31st in yards before contact, setting the stage for Bucky Irving to have a big-time game. Tampa's offensive line has been stellar in creating space for the run, and against a defense that's allowing nearly 60% success rate on running back carries, Irving's impact could be the difference maker. Now, on the other side, the Commanders' offense has hit some roadblocks with rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels. Love him. He is stellar. He's such a great quarterback. He should get Offensive Rookie of the Year or Rookie of the Year. But, I mean, his decline, he has had a bit of a decline. His rushing ability has been the bright spot, but his passing efficiency, that's what's taken a dip. Averaging 6.4 yards per attempt since week 10. That's 29th in the league. Now you're facing a Bucs secondary that's allowed just 6.4 yards per attempt and 3% touchdown rate. That's second best in the league over the last 7 games. Daniels is in for a tough night. The Commanders have also struggled against playoff caliber teams. They've had a great season, 1-4 against playoff caliber teams, while the Bucs have proven that they can rise to the occasion. So for me, all signs point to Tampa Bay flexing in this spot. -3 at home with the Bucs, I'm laying it. Now, since I do like Daniels, and he still can make plays with his legs, I also see this being a competitive matchup. It's a 3-point spread for a reason, right? I like this to be tight until the fourth quarter. So I'm also backing the Bucs -120 on the money line in the fourth quarter against the Commanders. When it comes to closing out games, the Bucs have been unmatched this season, leading the league in fourth quarter scoring. This late game dominance, it's really been their hallmark, consistently pulling away as opponents fall under pressure. While Washington, you have Daniels, third, fourth quarter scoring. So you assume high power, strength versus strength. The difference lies in the defense. Tampa Bay's defense, led by Todd Bowles, allowed the second fewest fourth quarter points in the league. That is a stark contrast with Washington, whose defense is second worst in the same category. They've even surrendered 42 points in the final quarters of the last 3 road games alone. That is a big time difference. Tampa locks it in. Washington struggles to hold the line. So you have Bowles' track record against rookie quarterbacks. You have Bucs' relentless fourth quarter blitzes. The Commanders could face chaos late. Daniels, who struggled in their week 1 meeting, has grown since, but so has the Bucs defense. It's going to have to overcome the defense that's only gotten sharper as the season progressed. So as the final game unfolds, as the final frame unfolds, Tampa Bay's experience, defensive pressure gives them the clear edge. Bet the Bucs to bucket out to close it out. So I like Bucs -3 against the Commanders. I like Bucs on the money line in the fourth quarter against the Commanders. Now the one prop that I do like, I'm focusing in. I'm trying to focus in. When you focus, tends to work out more successfully. Focusing on one player, 2 words, Jalen McMillan. McMillan over 59.5 receiving yards, +110. McMillan anytime touchdown, +150. The Bucs' rising wideout has been he has a golden opportunity in this matchup. Marshawn Lattimore, his presence in Washington's secondary, key, known for shutting down elite receivers like Mike Evans. Lattimore is likely going to shadow Evans all game, and historically, this matchup has really neutralized Evans, creating an opening for the Bucs' number 2 wide receiver. That's McMillan at this point. Evans draws Lattimore's attention. McMillan will find himself against Washington's less skilled defenders. That's a scenario that's tailor-made for playmaking abilities. McMillan peaking at the right time. Scored 7 touchdowns in his last 5 games and developed as an undeniable chemistry with Mayfield. Over his last 4 games, McMillan has seen at least 5 targets per game. I liked his receptions props at plus money, but I really wanted to focus in, so I'm picking only 2 of the 3, proving that he's really become a trusted weapon in Tampa's offense. Against the Commanders secondary, again, 27th against the pass, so this volume sets the stage for big gains, especially in the slot and on quick routes where McMillan thrives. Washington's defensive vulnerabilities don't stop there. They've struggled mightily against secondary receivers, and with Lattimore focused on Evans, McMillan should see plenty of opportunities to rack up yards, find the end zone. His versatility, adaptability, exploit some of these mismatches, makes him a dangerous weapon in the playoff matchup. So the bottom line is McMillan, prime spot to deliver, over 59.5 yards, feels achievable in a game where the Bucs are going to likely lean heavy on the passing attack, plus 150 for anytime touchdown. You're getting excellent value for a player in peak form. I'm going the yardage. You'll see that I mentioned the yardage is plus money, 59.5. Lower yardage around the 51.5 range was heavily juiced, like around minus 145, minus 150. I'm going for value.
All right, there we go. Pam is looking for value there on some of those props related to Jalen McMillan. She also has a parlay for us that ties into college football game tonight in the playoffs between her Texas Longhorns and the Ohio State Buckeyes. So let's hear what Pam has to say about tonight's game and wraps it into the NFL game that she just discussed, Tampa Bay and Washington.
So heavily invested in this Bucs game, but I'm also so heavily invested in the Ohio State Buckeyes for college football. So I'm going to do a 2-team parlay, Ohio State Moneyline, Bucs Moneyline, plus 135. For Ohio State, it's really simple math for me. Texas's defense, I am a Longhorn, and don't ever tell me that I am biased, because I am fading my Longhorns going to the game in burnt orange, but cheering for the Buckeyes. So Texas defense has been slipping lately. In their recent games, teams have them exposed. Clemson quarterback Kate Klubnik balled out, threw for over 300 yards against them. That's a one-dimensional offense. Cam Scatterbo not only ran all over them, but even threw a passing touchdown. Basically, Texas isn't stopping teams like they were early in the season. Why? Texas is playing actual offenses now. Ohio State is built to take advantage of some of these weaknesses. Their quarterback, Will Howard, is great at throwing the ball deep. He has elite wide receivers, some of the best in the country, veteran talent like Emeka Egbuka, plus a freshman wide receiver stud who looks NFL ready now in Jeremiah Smith. Plus, they can run the ball. Plus, they have the best red zone defense in the country. Texas's defense has struggled to handle teams that can do both, pass and run. That's what Ohio State can do. That's why I like Ohio State to win. I also like the Bucs, of course. Awesome in closing out games, especially in the fourth quarter. Baker Mayfield balling out, experience over a rookie. Give me the Buckeyes, give me the Bucs. Combine it, plus 135 on the money line.
All right, so there we have Pam. You know, we were going to put her at the top of the show just like we did here, but guess what? She's actually going to the game tonight. She's driving down to Dallas, Texas, and due to some of the traffic concerns, plus the weather down there, I guess they're supposed to get a little bit of snow. Not like the snow that we got out here, a little bit less, but it seems like the further south that you go, the more a little less amount of snow ends up panicking and freaking everybody out because they're not accustomed to it. And so Dallas, Texas is in total disarray, apparently, with this couple of inches of snow that might be coming. So she's actually headed to the game. She's going to be pulling for Ohio State, though, even though she is a massive Longhorns fan. Welcome in. No worries being late. You can always rewind to the live stream and catch the beginning of shows over there on YouTube. But yes, absolutely. Hit the like button everywhere and let's go. Before we bring in Joe, a couple of things that I want to kind of pile onto this game as it relates to the Commanders versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. This game has a lot of questions for me. There are a lot of things that I don't even know that we're going to find out when these two teams meet up. Obviously, they met up week one. I don't know that we're going to find out the answers, but we're certainly going to get closer to the answer. And that is, I'm not really sure how good this Commanders passing attack is, at least in current form, particularly. If you ignore the schedule of past defenses that they played, they rank on the season number 7 in EPA per dropback, number 12 in yards per attempt, and number 14 in success rate. So you could say, okay, that's above average. This is a above average pass offense, 7th in EPA, top 10. But since week 9, over that second half of the season, they're 17th in EPA per dropback, 19th in success rate, and 21st in yards per attempt. So you say, okay, they're trailing off a little bit. Could it be some injuries? Could it be Cliff Kingsbury being found out? But they're still about a average passing attack. Not really that much of a below average passing attack, just moved from top 10 to about average. Not that big of a deal. But think about this Commanders team and the way that they play their games. They are coming back in a lot of these games to win them in the fourth quarter. So their EPA and everything else gets jacked up massively. It's important when you're studying the Washington Commanders, especially in terms of how to anticipate game state, game flow, and this game being played out. You really should clip out those fourth quarters of their games and focus on what this team does in the first 3 quarters. And that's where, when I did that, I have massive questions about what are we actually going to get here from this Washington Commanders passing attack. In the fourth quarter of games, Jalen Daniels is number 2 in EPA per dropback, number 7 in yards per attempt, and number 10 in success rate. Obviously, absolutely elite. But in the first 3 quarters of games, Jalen Daniels is number 28 in EPA per dropback, number 23 in yards per attempt, and number 23 in success rate. Now, he got injured against the Carolina Panthers in week 7, wasn't healthy for a couple of weeks. Then he went up against 2 very difficult defenses in back-to-back weeks, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles. So guess what? Those were weeks 10 and 11. What if I remove all of that? I'm going to remove the injury, the immediate post-injury. I'm going to remove the difficult defenses in weeks 10 and 11. Let's focus on week 12 onward, week 12 to the end of the season, and we're only going to look at Jalen Daniels' passing performance here. When he's fully healthy upon returning, in the first 3 quarters of games, this is a shocking statistic, and I haven't heard anybody else discussing this, so you might be hearing it for the first time here. First 3 quarters of games from week 12 onward, Jalen Daniels, out of 39 quarterbacks, ranks number 34 in EPA per dropback, number 31 in success rate, and number 35 in yards per attempt. Again, we're talking about out of 39 qualifying quarterbacks. These numbers have come against the defenses versus the pass of the number 28 Dallas Cowboys twice, the number 20 Atlanta Falcons, number 16 New Orleans Saints, number 11 Tennessee Titans, and 1 game against the number 2 ranked Philadelphia Eagles. So we're not talking about elite defenses that he's been going up here against, except for that 1 game against the Philadelphia Eagles. They've played, the Commanders have, over the course of the entire season, the number 2 easiest schedule of opposing pass defenses and the number 4 easiest schedule of pass defenses overall. So, you know, we really, in my opinion, should be wondering and should be asking, like, how good is this Washington Commanders passing attack? Yeah, they come back in games and they've won a lot of walk-off games, but this is especially since week 12, a bottom 10 passing attack. Jalen Daniels is a quarterback that's ranking 30th or worse in a ton of these metrics in the first 3 quarters of games. And then they work miracles in the fourth quarter. One last thing I wanted to do, looking at, the trending direction of I shared the overall stats, but let's just look at games, okay? Jalen Daniels is averaging 7.1 yards per attempt on the season. In the last 7 games, so an average, right, is you're going to have games better than that. You're going to have games worse than that. That's what the average is. You sum up all the numbers, divide by the number of games. That's what your average yards per attempt is. Over the last 7 games, Jalen Daniels has exceeded his average in yards per attempt 1 time. That was versus the Saints. So the other games, the other 6 games, he's averaged 3.2 and 3.7 yards per attempt versus the Cowboys, 6.3 yards per attempt versus the Falcons, 5.4 and 6.9 yards per attempt in his games versus the Eagles, and 7 yards per attempt versus the Titans. So he is trending horribly the last 7 games in yards per attempt. Let's look at success rate. His year-to-date average success rate is 42%. He has just 2 out of his last 8 games where he's had above average success rate for himself. So he's trending horribly there as well. 6 games below his success rate. And then EPA per attempt as well. In his last 8 games, he's likewise exceeded his average in only 2 out of those 8 games. So in the early part of the season, he was playing much, much better, exceeding his averages. Obviously, his average was much higher because he was playing better. His average has dropped down lower because he's playing worse. And now he's dropped off. All of his statistics of late have been well below what his year-to-date average was. This Washington Commanders passing attack is trailing down. The early season magic that we saw the first 3 quarters of games with Cliff and Jalen Daniels, that's relatively gone right now. And we see some of it come back in the fourth quarters in desperation mode where they have to have it and defenses are playing a little bit softer and Washington's completing a lot of these passes that have like very low expected completion rate. They're just making magic and working magic. And obviously they're ahead of schedule right now. They're in the playoffs as when Jalen Daniels is a rookie with Dan Quinn in his first season. Like we are seeing this team exceed expectations and they've gotten this magical run. Will it continue in this game? But what makes this game so difficult to handicap, in my opinion, is the fact that this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is very beat up. They are getting potentially a couple of their corners back. Winfield is a safety and they're getting another cornerback. So if Dean and Winfield are back and they're playing, like this defense and this secondary should be theoretically better. But the Tampa Bay defense has played a lot of nobodies from a passing perspective themselves for the last half of the season. They have not played a very competitive schedule of opposing passing attacks. In fact, since week 12, the Buccaneers have played the 27th toughest schedule of passing attacks, obviously out of 32 teams. And in chronological order, here's the passing attacks that they have played. The number 31 New York Giants led by Tommy DeVito. The number 30 Carolina Panthers led by Bryce Young. The number 28 Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders led by Desmond Ridder and Aiden O'Connell. The number 17 Los Angeles Chargers led by Justin Herbert. The number 29 Dallas Cowboys led by Cooper Rush. The number 30 Carolina Panthers again led by Bryce Young. And then the number 21 New Orleans Saints led by Spencer Rattler. Not a single above average passing attack during that span. So that's what makes this game, in my opinion, tough to handicap, particularly when Washington has the football. Tampa's defense hasn't been tested, but they are getting a little bit healthier, but they've played a lot of nobodies. Washington's offense ranks highly over the course of the entire season if you look at year-to-date numbers, but is spiraling out of control horribly. And if you are able to separate out fourth quarter and just look at the first 3 quarters, Jalen Daniels has been 30th or worse in basically every single critical statistic down the stretch against some very poor pass defenses. So a lot of questions on both sides of the ball. And like I said, I don't know that we're going to get the answer in this particular game. Somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to advance to the next round where they're going to play a much more competitive and more difficult opponent that probably has fewer questions. But right now on that side of the ball, we have a lot of questions with both the Washington offense and the Tampa Bay defense. So there's a few questions about them. Nick says, I just don't trust Todd Bowles. I don't disagree, Nick. I also don't know that I trust Cliff Kingsbury. So you still have those questions. Like I certainly don't really trust Cliff Kingsbury either. Let's see. Exile. I have concerns on the Commanders offense. I backed their team total overs with mixed results. So that's some good firsthand betting, experience from Exile there. I would agree. This team is theoretically, I know a lot of the fantasy guys, like the guys that I talk with, you see the total sitting at 50.5. And it was like, should this be going a little bit higher? Should we see more money coming in on the over here? Tampa is allowing tons of points. Washington's offense looks pretty good. Washington's defense has question marks. Tampa's offense should be able to score. We didn't see this game move to the over at all. In fact, we saw it move a little bit to the under. And in fact, today, for the first time, I am seeing South Point, which is a book out in Las Vegas, at 49.5. That's the first 49.5 that I have seen on the screen. I've seen the number come down to 50 at a number of different spots. This is the first time that I've seen this number dip down into the 40s. And so the question becomes, will Tampa, you look at when you talk about Todd Bowles, Nick, when you talk about Todd Bowles is a defensive-minded coach from the get-go. And so will Todd Bowles think, I don't want Baker Mayfield losing this game for us, theoretically, with some of those interceptions. If you look at Baker Mayfield, he's been throwing almost one interception in every single game. I want to say 5 of the last 6 games, he's thrown at least one interception. He wasn't doing that to start the season. He's been trying and forcing the ball to Mike Evans. They probably upped their pass rate. Honestly, I can't imagine. I was talking internally with like Rich and Ray about how stressful that must have been on Baker Mayfield himself, because he was putting the burden of helping Mike Evans break this record on himself. Because Mike Evans can only do what Mike Evans could do, like try to catch the passes that are thrown to you, try to run good routes. But the play caller can call passes or runs, and the quarterback has the option to throw the ball to whoever he wants. And so I think Baker felt a ton of pressure to help Mike Evans break that record. Now that they've gotten that record broken, do they run the ball a little bit more? And is this not a great situation to run the football? So like if there is a little bit more running from the Tampa Bay side of things here, that clock could be ticking unless those runs are explosive from Bucky Irving. By the way, might have to go out there and get a Bucky Irving jersey for him hitting the 26-1 future for us. Most rushing yards for a rookie this season. We bet that pre-flop and cashed out big time on that prop. But that's the way that this game could still have some points, in my opinion, if Tampa leans more on the run, is Bucky Irving being explosive. So a lot of question marks there on both sides of the ball. Okay. Let us now get into our NFL ref expert, Joe Gibbs, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about a couple of the games. And Joe's a little bit under the weather, I think, from the sounds of it. So we're going to just get him to jump in here and get us these answers pretty quickly. Joe, we're going to first talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Baltimore Ravens. Alex Kemp is on the call for this game. Go ahead and tell us what you think we're going to get out of Alex Kemp and how his involvement in this game could impact the side or the total.
Okay, so as a general rule in the playoffs, they try to ease back on the penalties, particularly the offensive holding and false start combination. Those do drop once the playoffs come around. So that actually, in theory, helps Baltimore a lot this week. So the Kemp crew itself, and he's the head referee. But as you know, Warren, they have these all-star crews. So you have Kemp, the head referee, and then they bring in a guy from the Novak crew and the Ron Torbert crew for this particular game. But at the end of the day, it's still Kemp's crew. He calls the shots and he determines how it's going to be officiated. But some of the numbers with this guy this season, they say he can call holding on every play. Well, the Kemp crew did their best to fulfill that. They co-ranked number 1 for offensive holding and defensive holding this season, which on the surface doesn't sound good for Baltimore because they struggle with offensive holding. That's been a problem all season. The good news is 68% of those have come on the road. At home, they've actually been pretty good. They've been one of the least penalized teams at home for offensive holding. The other thing is the Kemp crew, in that combination of offensive holding and false start, have called 63% of their penalties on the road team this season. So you combine that. Ravens pretty good at home. Kemp puts more emphasis on the road team as far as these two key penalty categories. And all of a sudden, Baltimore comes up smelling roses. This is an interesting one here. Alex Kemp crew, 15-1 for favorites this season. 15-1 straight up, 12-3-1 against the spread. That's the best in the NFL, which I've been keeping an eye on this since about week 10. I'm thinking, well, it's going to revert back to the norm, but it hasn't. So favorites are 15-1 straight up with Alex Kemp and 12-3-1 against the spread. Home teams in general this season with Kemp, 10-5-1 against the spread. The Ravens all-time 4-1 with Alex Kemp. The one loss they had was in 2020 at home versus Tennessee with no crowds in attendance. So keep that in mind. There's going to be a full house on Saturday night. But as for the teams themselves, I mean, if you follow me on your sharp football analysis column each week, Warren, I mean, I've been really bullish on the Ravens, and I've been fading the Steelers for the past month. And I mentioned this to you on our Wednesday meeting, I think it was. I watched that HBO Hard Knocks on Tuesday night. And the thing that really stuck out to me was when they would, and maybe this is a little bit misleading, when they went to the Steelers sidelines, there was just no energy. Like there was no juice. There was nothing except for Russell Wilson with the goofy, let's go guys, the usual cliche stuff that he does. But they just seemed dead. They seem like dead men walking to me. And I just think the team's reeling. I took Baltimore when they played Pittsburgh 3 weeks ago, and I like them again. I think Pittsburgh, I think they're done. They got nothing left in the tank on this one.
Joe's analysis. Certainly, you did mention that in our Wednesday meeting, some of the observations about Pittsburgh and their sideline. And now they're going up against their most hated rival that they have because they've owned some of the teams from Ohio in the past, especially during the Ben Roethlisberger years. But the Baltimore Ravens is a team they've had some success against, but they always get their biggest and toughest fights against Baltimore. And the games have in the past come down to some of the smaller margins. This one, obviously, one of the largest spreads that we've seen in a Pittsburgh versus Baltimore game. But as Joe indicated, Baltimore Ravens favored by 10 points, and Alex Kemp is 15-1 for favorites. Favorites have won 15 out of his 16 games, and they've covered 10 out of those games as well when he has been on the call. Okay, let's go to the game that got moved. This was a game interesting. I'll have a note to subscribers because we did have some action on this Minnesota LA Rams game. And for most of you out there, this bet does get voided. There are some books that keep the action, but most of the books that I've seen are voiding the action, and that's because the home field and location has changed. I've seen varying different rules. Some rules, if the game is played on the same day within like 20 miles or 30 miles from the prior venue, then all bets are action. But in this case, it's being moved all the way to Glendale, Arizona, which obviously totally removes home field advantage, which is something that Joe is going to be talking about here momentarily. So you may have to go back in and rebet some of the things that you bet earlier. I just stayed away from even handicapping props on this one because I didn't want to fire off any props that then would get voided and sort of tip my hand as to what I was looking to do on that particular game. So I stayed clear of this game from a betting perspective on the prop side of things. And there is a little bit of work to do to go back and rebet a couple of things. But that being said, we have the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Los Angeles Rams. This is a Monday night game, and the referee on the call is John Hussey. Obviously, the Vikings are not on a short week here because they played last Sunday, so they got 1 day of extra rest for this game, whereas the Rams had a de facto bye week last week because they didn't seem to care if they were going to take on the Vikings. They just wanted to keep their guys healthy. They already beat the Vikings earlier this year, and I guess Sean McVay feels pretty good about this matchup. So let's hope for his sake that it ends up paying off, that he's able to win against the Minnesota Vikings, or there's going to be a lot of question marks about his decision to rest the guys and have to play the 5th seed, which was going to be the loser of the Minnesota-Detroit game. Joe, talk to us a little bit about John Hussey and his impact on this particular game.
Yeah, so, I mean, I understand there's bigger things at play here, so I was kind of bummed that they moved the game because that sort of throws a lot of my stuff out the window. And I was hoping they'd move it here to Vegas, as opposed to Arizona, because this is actually a game I'd like to go to. If it was here at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas, this is a great matchup. This could be the best game of the weekend. And Hussey's a great home field referee. I mean, there's really not much point going through that at this point because they're not playing at home. You're at a neutral site. It's just kind of a wonky game now. Like, how does it affect each team? What's the fan base, presence at the game? But Hussey himself is a crew, and he has a couple of guys on this crew from the Shepherds and the Blake officiating crews, which is interesting because the Hussey crew have called a disproportionately low percentage of false start and offensive holding penalties this season, as have the Blake and Shepherds crews. but they've called a disproportionately high percentage of defensive holding, defensive pass interference. And so as it turns out, the Sheffers and the Blake crew are the side judge and the back judge. So again, they're going to tone down the penalties in the playoffs, so it may not come into play as much as it normally would. But I wrote in the column this week that, these coaches know, 17 points, 20 points is not going to get it done. I mean, look across the field at the offensive firepower, on the Vikings side with Jefferson and Hawkinson and Addison, and then the Rams with Cup, Puka Nacua. It's going to be a game where they're going to need to be in the 20s, 23, 24, 27 points, somewhere in that range. And then as far as these teams from a penalty perspective, the Vikings ranked number 1 as a beneficiary of automatic first downs via penalty. The Rams ranked number 5 as a beneficiary of automatic first downs via penalty. They co-ranked number 2 as beneficiaries of defensive pass interference penalties. So you combine that with this officiating crew and the all-star crew makeup that will call, in theory, a higher percentage of those penalties. I mean, right now I'm leaning more towards the over than I am now the Rams because it's been moved away. I mean, I don't know what you think about it. It's just hard to gauge with this game now, the way that it's all transpired.
The other thing too, Joe, with this game that's a lot confusing in my opinion is what is the mindset of the Rams? Obviously, they've been building towards this, but it's not just a little bit of impact here. This is a continuous daily impact on these players. And knowing one of the guys that we work with who lives out in LA, is staying with family out there, and they've had to move houses multiple times because he's got some cousins and his parents are out there. And so they're moving from one house to the next based upon evacuation notices. The air quality has been really bad. So these players, it's difficult for them to practice the way that they normally might practice. And then it's not just as if, and I'm not trying to minimize like a hurricane, but hurricane comes through and then is gone. You've got these couple of hours or, longer spans of time than that where there's a problem. These fires popping up all over the place. Okay, our house is safe right now. Okay, well, now our house might be in trouble. What am I going to do with my wife and the kids? What about all the stuff in our house? Like, there's so many distractions, I think, playing a role in the Rams this week that it's not like you can just say, well, let's move out of town and go to Arizona for a few days and everything will be better and we won't have to think about it. It's still going to weigh on your mind there. So, that's the one thing I think a veteran coach like Sean McVay, strong veteran leadership in that locker room led by, Matthew Stafford, of course, and Cooper Kupp should help as best as possible. But it's still got to be something that factors in here a little bit. And when they moved the game, they obviously moved the point spread a little bit from 1.5 down to up to 2.5 in favor of the Minnesota Vikings now. So the Vikings were favored in LA to begin with LA not having that much of a home field advantage. Now the game is in Arizona and totally away from LA, which they were bringing some crowd in there, but it's still not the same type of home field advantage like a game in Seattle or like a game in Minnesota or these types of venues or Green Bay, etc. So this game now, though, none of those fans are probably going to come to this game in Arizona. And the other factor here, Joe, is that think about this. A lot of the Vikings fans, they would not have been traveling to LA. If the game was played in LA with these fires being a threat, none of those people were going to come. So it probably would have been an even larger home field advantage for the Rams from a crowd noise perspective, because I doubt many Vikings fans would have traveled to LA to attend this game. Now the game's in Arizona. It's a shorter flight. They don't have to worry about the fires. And a lot of the people from LA have more important things going on, and they never were planning on traveling in the first place. They were planning on just attending a home game. So I would expect this crowd might skew Vikings heavy from a home field advantage perspective. Theoretically, it's still not going to be a ton of people, but I would imagine there's going to be a higher chance that there's more Vikings fans than there would have been in LA. And so that might skew things as well and make it just extra confusing.
Yeah, it's a tough game to get a read on now. It's probably just best to stay away and look at it from an in-game perspective because, like you said, there's just so many extenuating circumstances now for the Rams. So we'll see what happens. That's all we can say.
Yep. All right, well, there you have it from Joe Gibbs, our ref expert. You can read his work up at sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can follow him over on X. Joe, hope that you feel better soon. I do want to also mention here real quick that we were dealing with another game last year that was in a similar circumstance in this very round. And we got royally screwed on that game. And that was the Buffalo Bills taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you guys can remember 1 year ago, that game was a fascinating game, a game that I'll never forget because we spent a lot of time looking at long-range forecasts and predicting weather, etc. And we had a very good feel for that game being impacted last year in Buffalo by snow and by winds. And I believe it was supposed to, I forget what day it was supposed to be played on now, but we were dead on accurate and we bet the under, and that total dropped by at least 5 points from what we bet at, potentially more. We felt outstanding about that bet. We bet on a lot of player props, especially passing props and receiving props. We had so much action on this game, and we gave it out to subscribers as well. And we had so much invested there from a weather perspective. And then all of a sudden, very close to the game, maybe it was 48 hours ahead, there started to become rumors that they could theoretically delay the game to another day. And we knew that that was going to cause massive problems for us because when you're placing bets on a game to occur at a certain time based upon the weather expected at that time, all of a sudden they move the game to the next day. You don't want the under at a certain number. You don't want the passing yards under. You don't want the receiving yards under because you were betting it based upon the weather at that time. And we were so accurate based upon the weather that we were forecasting, that we were projecting ahead of the books, ahead of the other bettors, because we were getting in early and we got all the best lines. And then they moved it to the next day, I believe, to I want to say Monday Night Football. And it screwed us big time. We lost money. Some of the bets got refunded, but we lost the opportunity to make money. And then other bets did not get refunded, like the situation that we're dealing with here for this game in moving from Los Angeles to Arizona. Some books chose to honor the bets, of course, which helped them because all of their sharp money, all the sharp bettors were betting unders on all of those props. And so when they honored those bets with the weather being fine, it really screwed all the guys that the sharp, let's face it, you're not going to have a lot of square money coming in and moving the market and betting overs on like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But you are going to have a lot of the sharp guys who are able to get down money at that point, bearing some of the unders because they're the ones looking at those long range forecasts. And they're the ones who are anticipating these things when most of the people don't even think about the weather forecast for that following weekend on like a Monday or Sunday night. So I'm just having flashbacks of that and really annoyed because Exile says opportunity cost went right down the drain. Brett said DK didn't void my under bet even though the game was postponed. Tyler said didn't get those stupid bets voided either. So dumb. This is my take on it as well. Books are going to try to screw the bettors more often than not. But when you have a game, and I understand a delay, right? Like a in-game delay. And this happens sometimes too, and it messes us up from betting some of these unders when there's an expected storm that's coming through, not a snowstorm, but a thunderstorm or rainstorms, things of that nature that are expected to come through with winds and thunder and rain. Maybe not so the thunder because it's hard to predict whether it's going to be a thunderstorm or not, but let's pretend on like a Wednesday, we're expecting wind and rain coming through in Miami or in Charlotte or in Nashville, wherever the stadium might be. So we are starting betting some unders in those games. And then it's halftime and the score is, 7-3 and you're feeling pretty good about it. But then they delay the second half for 2 hours or an hour and a half to let the thunder elements and lightning elements move through. And all of a sudden now the second half that you thought was going to be windy and rainy is delayed until the storm has passed. And now the second half is played with just a wet surface, but there's no wind, no rain. The balls can travel fine through the air. The guys can catch them properly. And all of a sudden, the pass rushers are slipping around, the DBs are slipping around, and the game sees a bunch of points and ends up going over, or the props go over. So these are the hazards of trying to be smart and bet some of these weather unders and being right about the forecast, but so right that they end up delaying some things. So that's one aspect that you can get screwed on from a storm that moves through at the point that period of time. But the books don't have any responsibility with those types of bets, obviously. But when we're talking about a game gets moved from one day to another day, the books want that action. They don't want to have to refund all the people that placed their bets for the last 4 days on this game. So just because the venue has changed, some of them don't want to move it. But I honestly believe that all these books, if the day of the game gets moved, these bets should be refunded. If the situations change, the people that are placing those bets, for the most part, the sizable bets are doing so, factoring in a number of things, and those things should be honored with a refund. So that's my take on that, and the post-traumatic stress disorder of remembering that happened last year with that Bills game getting moved. Let us see here. What do we got next? We're gonna hit some strength of schedule. But before we do that, I want to mention here for you guys that playoff games kick off in about 24 hours, and we already have 6 betting recommendations live for Wild Card Weekend with props coming out this afternoon. I'm gonna dump a large set of props out for subscribers here. I don't know, within the next 2 hours, probably. We have 2 massive deals for you to get on board for the postseason with us. You can either use Show 250 to get $250 off the rest of playoff package all the way through the Super Bowl with the write-ups and the analysis and the Super Bowl report. And we have, when you join, whether you're doing the weekly or the one I just shared, which is the rest of this way, you'll get detailed write-ups for every single one of these games, breaking down every single player and matchup and aspect to the game itself, as well as the player-by-player matchup. So if you want to know Bucky Irving versus the Washington Commanders, we've got a whole section about Bucky Irving versus the Washington Commanders. You want to know about just our overall opinion about the Bucs versus the Commanders, irregardless of specific players, we write that up as well. So there's a lot of analysis for every single one of these games, and it's published pretty early in the week. We already have all 6 games broken down. If you want to get on board just for the week, you can use Show 75. Show 75 gets 75% off the weekly package. $100 better is won $15,655 with us this season, and we are on a roll headed into the postseason here. Looking forward to Wild Card Weekend and having some success for you guys. We've already got a number of totals that I've posted, and we're going to be coming back with some other bets and, like I said, props this afternoon. Okay, let's get into our strength of schedule graphic. First one here, I believe, is for offenses. So this is a different type of graphic than what you've seen previously with me sharing some of the strength of schedule in the past. I've isolated only the teams that are playing this weekend. And what you can see on the top is past defenses of opponents played from weeks 12 onward. So over there on the left, you see the weeks that I've isolated. I'm isolating only weeks 12 onward. And the reason, obviously, that we are doing that is I don't care what you did weeks 1, 2, 3. I want to see if there's going to be any type of shock to your system with the game that you're playing right now based upon what you've been playing the last month or so, last month or two. So week 12 onward. So if you look at a team like the Buffalo Bills up at the top graphic here, these are the past defenses of opponents. So on average, since week 12, the Buffalo Bills has played the 21st ranked schedule of 21st ranked pass defenses. So in other words, the average pass defense that the Buffalo Bills played ranks 21st. This week, they're going up against the Denver Broncos, whose pass defense ranks number 1. I got some comments that I'm going to share about this game momentarily, but this is a look at kind of the Buffalo Bills will be moving up in competition compared to what they've played from a passing perspective. Below that, you will also see the rushing opponents that these teams have played. So on average, the Buffalo Bills have played opponents from week 12 through week 18 that rank 18th against the run. Again, below average. Now they're playing the Denver Broncos, who rank number 2 against the run. So the Broncos have a tough run defense. That's who Buffalo is going to play. They're used to playing easier run defenses. Will this be any type of shock to the Buffalo Bills system? Their offense going up against a defense that ranks much better in run and pass than what they've been accustomed to playing. Other teams that are going to be stepping up in class with theoretical shock to their systems this weekend. The Green Bay Packers are notable from, let's stay on the pass defense section. Green Bay Packers are notable. The game between the Houston Texans and the LA Chargers, very notable, with both teams having played around average opponents over the last 2 months and now stepping up to top 5 opponents against the pass. So both defenses are more difficult than what both of those offenses have been accustomed to playing. You've got the Washington Commanders taking a step down, as do the Minnesota Vikings taking a step down. So that's notable. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Washington Commanders, we didn't talk about that side of the ball as much, but Tampa Bay's played some pretty bad pass defenses, and now they're going up against the 6th most difficult pass defense year to date statistically that has Marshawn Lattimore back of the Washington Commanders. Now, I think that Washington Commanders ranking is a little generous. I do think that there's aspects of that pass defense that certainly can be exploited here. But with Lattimore back, that does change some things. He's going to make that one a little bit interesting. And then from a run defense perspective, look at where the Bucs are there. The Bucs, as I mentioned before, do they just decide to run Bucky Irving a fair amount? Because they've played easy run defenses, yes, but they are now playing the 31st ranked Washington Commanders run defense this week. So you look at the Bucs are playing a top 10 theoretically pass defense of the Commanders. Now they're playing also a bottom 2 run defense of the Commanders. It would make a lot of sense for Liam Cohen to get Bucky Irving pretty involved in this game. The Rams are taking a big step up in terms of run defense that they're going to be facing. And that's interesting because Matthew Stafford has not been playing all that great down the stretch here. From a yards per attempt perspective, 3 consecutive games, he has not hit 6 yards per attempt even. Not even 6 yards per attempt. Now, they've won those last 3 games that he played in, obviously not including week 18, but those are pretty staggeringly poor numbers from a yards per attempt perspective. And they're playing a team that has a pretty good run defense. So will the Rams have to rely a little bit more on Matthew Stafford and getting him clicking from a passing perspective there? All right, Matt, let's switch over to the defensive strength of schedule. So now we're going to be looking at, are the offenses that you're playing going to be a challenge for you? And I want to start by looking at the Denver Broncos. We mentioned how the Denver Broncos defense statistically looked pretty strong. But the reality is the Denver Broncos have played a very easy schedule. They've played the 20th on average teams that rank 20th against the pass over the last 2 months, and they've played teams that rank 22nd against the run the last 2 months. Now they're playing the Buffalo Bills, which are top 10 against the pass and the run. So that's going to be a big step up. So it's sort of a shock to the system of the Buffalo Bills that they're going to play a defense like the Broncos, but it's also a shock to the Broncos defense that they're going to be playing a passing attack and a running attack like what the Buffalo Bills have. So that's going to be a very interesting game to dissect and analyze. You do have the Chargers taking a big step down. Their defense is going to be going up against a considerably easier offense to strategize against as it relates to the Houston Texans. The Chargers have played about a league average schedule of both pass offense and run offense over the last month. And now they're playing the 27th ranked pass offense and the 25th ranked run offense of the Houston Texans. So the Chargers defense, life does get considerably easier for them. Where life doesn't get easier are all the teams off to the right there, pretty much from the Rams onward. But most of all, the biggest jumps, and that's what you're looking for, are the biggest differences in prior schedule to current opponent, like the Eagles to an extent from a passing perspective, but more so the Steelers from both a pass and run perspective, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from a pass and run perspective, and the Washington Commanders. Those defenses are going to have their work cut out for them because the opponent that they are going up against is much more complicated and difficult to defend from both a passing and rushing perspective than what they've played the last 2 months. Now, for Pittsburgh, they're very accustomed to taking on Baltimore. It's a big step up, but there's a lot of familiarity there. For Tampa Bay and Washington, they did play one another earlier this year, but that was back in week 1. That was back before Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury sort of clicked. We know they're not clicking quite as much anymore, but they're still much more experienced with how to handle Todd Bowles' blitz and coverage schemes than they were back in week 1. And of course, Baker has a lot more familiarity and comfort level with Liam Cohen and what this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense is going to be looking to do in ways that they can theoretically attack that Washington Commanders secondary and defense. So that matchup is going to be interesting, but it's going to be tough on all of those defenses there off to the right of both of these graphics to have some success. Okay. With that said, let's see. I'll talk briefly just about this Denver Broncos game. I think 2 interesting aspects to this game. We covered all the NFC games in detail. We talked a lot about this Pittsburgh-Baltimore game on the Tuesday show. So now we're going to talk briefly about this game here as it relates to the Bills, because we really haven't touched on that yet. One interesting aspect to this game is going to be the pressure that Buffalo does or does not get on Bo Nix, because I firmly believe that pressure matters a ton in this particular game. Bo Nix has big splits, blitz versus not blitz. He has moderate splits, pressure versus no pressure. Most quarterbacks are better when not being pressured. Bo Nix is particularly sensitive to the blitz, especially week 9 onward. If you get rid of the Kansas City Chiefs game, when he is not being blitzed, he's 9th in EPA, 10th in yards per attempt, 12th in completion rate. When he is blitzed, 27th in EPA, 33rd in completion rate, 33rd in yards per attempt, and 24th in completion rate. Basically moves from a top 10 quarterback to a bottom 10 quarterback in every metric when he is blitzed. The Bills blitz at the 28th highest rate, aka the 5th lowest rate. They blitz on only 18% of dropbacks. So they aren't going to be blitzing a lot. So that should theoretically boost Bo Nix into this place where he is a top 10 quarterback from a statistical perspective if he's not facing very much blitz. The really interesting aspect to this game, though, is the pressure and how can Buffalo generate pressure on Bo Nix, because Buffalo's defense has the second largest splits and shift in efficiency allowed based upon whether or not they get pressure. So let me try to find it here to show you. I'm using my old packet here, but okay. Down on this axis is EPA per attempt when getting pressure, and on the y-axis is EPA per attempt when not getting pressure. And so, as you can see, the Buffalo Bills are way over here. They are, what is it, like the 5th or 6th best team when they get pressure at limiting EPA. However, they are the 2nd worst team on the y-axis. They're all the way down here at the bottom when not getting pressure. So they have the largest, 2nd largest only to the New York Giants split in EPA per attempt allowed when they do or do not get pressure. The Buffalo Bills are going to be going up against this Denver Broncos offensive line, which ranks number 1 in pass block win rate. If you go to ESPN's statistics pass block win rate, the Broncos are the number 1 offensive line. It sounds a little surprising, but that's what ESPN's analytics are showing. They are allowing the 6th lowest pressure on a quarterback. Now, we know that quarterbacks also control their pressure. So the pass block win rate is isolating just the linemen, the pressure incorporates the lineman and the quarterback as well. Number 1 in pass block win rate, number 6 in pressure rate allowed is the Broncos offensive line. On the season, the Bills have played just 2 teams that rank top 10 in pass block win rate. Just 2 teams. And the Broncos are number 1. And the Buffalo Bills, when not getting pressure, are 30th in EPA per attempt, as I already had mentioned, and 26th in success rate and 22nd in yards per attempt. Whereas when they do get pressure, 8th in EPA per attempt on the entire season. But over the last 10 weeks here, they ranked second worst. And they are much better when getting pressure in success rate and in yards per attempt. So that's going to be an interesting aspect to this game. The other interesting aspect to this game that I don't think a lot of people are probably thinking about or aware of is how good Bo Nix has been and this Broncos offense has been down inside of the red zone, and how poor the Bills defense has been down inside of the red zone. The Bills red zone conversion rate allowed since week 11 is 72%. So 72% of the time teams are getting into the red zone, they're scoring touchdowns. That's 5th worst in the NFL. In addition, they are allowing 37% of drives to reach the red zone, which is 28th in the NFL. So both of these marks are 5th worst. And they're allowing 32% of all drives to score touchdowns, which is 3rd worst in the NFL. So this Bills defense is allowing you to get to the NFL, and then they're allowing you to score when you're down. They're allowing you to get to the red zone, and then they are allowing you to score when you are down inside of the red zone. And the Broncos are converting, since week 11, the 3rd best rate of red zone trips into touchdowns. They are converting 75% of their red zone trips into touchdowns, eerily similar with what the Bills are allowing at 72% of red zone trips allowed being converted into touchdowns. So that's going to be extremely interesting. The Broncos are actually tied with the Detroit Lions for red zone conversion rate. The Broncos ranked number 1 in goal to go conversion rate. So I'm fascinated to see that game because if the Bills have a lead, if the Bills are playing from a position of strength in this game, which is what is expected by the point spread. The point spread is sitting here with the Buffalo Bills laying 8.5 points at most every book. Some books are still sitting at 9 points. So if the Buffalo Bills are laying 9 points and playing from a position of strength, but the Denver Broncos are sitting here needing to pass the football because they're playing from a deficit on the scoreboard, and the Broncos are protecting Bo Nix, and the Bills can't get pressure, and the Bills rank 2nd worst when they don't get pressure, and the Bills are already ranking 5th worst at allowing teams to get into the red zone. The odds are that the Broncos are going to have some success with Bo Nix at moving the ball down the field. He's been a top 10 quarterback when he's not pressured. His O-line is one of the best in the NFL at protecting him. The Bills are not getting a lot of pressure. They're not blitzing a lot. So Bo Nix, if we're seeing this play out in this manner, should be able to get the ball down into the red zone when playing from a deficit. And then they've been having success scoring when they're in the red zone. Like I said, 3rd best team, number 1 inside goal to go. And the Bills defense is terrible at stopping teams from scoring down inside the red zone. So that game's going to be fascinating. It could be theoretically a game where you don't want to write off the Denver Broncos too early. If the Bills get up to a lead here, you don't necessarily want to write off the Denver Broncos too early, because they could come back in the situation if the Bills aren't getting pressure and they are able to move the ball down the field. I don't know that we're going to see any of these big, high-flying, deep bombs from Bo Nix have success against the Buffalo Bills. This is way too fundamentally sound of a defense from Sean McDermott. He also has a very good track record against rookie quarterbacks, also playing at home. I mean, we know that he held Lamar Jackson. This was when they were a run-first team, of course, but was it 20-3 on a blustery evening? The weather is supposed to be good for this game, though, but yeah, I think that game is going to be a fascinating game for me. Just like Jaden Daniels, the whole Bo Nix stuff, they're a year ahead of schedule, right? They shouldn't necessarily have been into the playoffs this season. They're not expected to win this game. Certainly as a large underdog of 8.5 to 9 points, there's very little expected of them. So it'll be interesting to see if Sean Payton comes out in this game, plays a little bit more loose, tries to get Bo Nix a little bit more confidence. I think the worst thing that Sean Payton can do, who am I to tell Sean Payton how to game plan for this? But my thought is you got to get Bo Nix feeling good in this game from a confidence perspective. And so if you turn around and you're handing the ball up because you're scared of this Bills defense and you don't want this Bills defense to attack your quarterback unless you need to throw the football, and you start coming out here and you're running the ball on first and second down the first quarter of this game, those runs, I do not know if they're going to be that successful. And if they are not that successful and you've got Bo Nix passing on third and obvious pass situations, that's where the Buffalo Bills could tee off and have some success defensively. I would want to get Bo Nix pretty comfortable early in this game by passing the ball, allowing that to then open up the run game a little bit. I'm not talking about pass deep. I'm talking about pass to some of the backs out of the backfield or Marvin Mims out of the backfield on early downs in the first quarter. Get him into a rhythm, let him feel a little bit better about himself, progress the ball, and try to put up some points, whether they're field goals from deeper or touchdowns when you get inside of the red zone. And then you can mix in the run game a little bit more. So that'll be fascinating. I'm interested to see how Sean Payton plays this game out. Sean McDermott, Better Boss says Sean McDermott versus Sean Payton goes back to the NFC South Panthers versus Saints days. Dramatic. Yeah, that's right. McDermott down there with the Carolina Panthers for several years as their defensive coordinator. Tom says, who has the coaching advantage in Denver versus Buffalo? Both make mistakes. I agree there. It's hard for me to overlook the critical type of mistakes that Sean McDermott makes because they seem to be in more high leverage situations. They seem to be less defensible, and there's more that we are seeing of these because they're in the bigger games more frequently. We haven't seen Sean Payton in this situation in a while, in a playoff game, certainly. So I'm interested to see how he performs here, but I hope he doesn't let me down, but I'm certainly not expecting him to come out and surprise with great plus EV coaching decisions in the most high leverage spots. I would think that more likely than not, we see him struggle in those spots as well. Tom says, Warren, with all this being considered, do you think the Broncos team total is worth a shot? It's possible. I mean, the Bills themselves have gone over their team total. What? I want to say in almost every single home game. I want to say the Buffalo Bills themselves have scored, look at my notes here. What are the Bills? I didn't copy and paste that section. Give me 1 second here. Let's see here. Oh, man, I'm trying to find this statistic and I don't. Oh, here we go. Okay. The Bills have scored 30-plus points in 9 of their last 10 games when not resting starters, and they've scored 40-plus points in 3 of their last 4 games. So the real question, again, with these wildcard matchups is, what do you believe the Denver Broncos defense is? If you believe the Denver Broncos defense is as advertised, or statistically their strength of schedule hasn't mattered as much, they're still going to be a good defense in this spot, or you like how they match up against the Buffalo Bills, let's say, and you think they can hold the Broncos in check, or the Bills offense in check, then maybe the Bills team total over would be the bet to make. It's probably right around like 18.5, 19.5 at this point, probably like 19.5. But I don't really believe the Bills defense is quite that good. And I think I don't believe the Broncos defense. All these teams are Bills, Broncos, Buffalo Broncos, it's a little confusing, but I don't believe the Broncos defense is as good as advertised. I think that the Bills will be able to score here. The way that this game stays under the total and is not as fun, let's say, from a over props perspective game or an over betting perspective game, is if the Bills don't get out to that lead. And then Sean Payton can run the football a little bit more or less effectively. And then they can slow the pace down, because the Broncos do like to slow the pace down a little bit here. And so the Broncos could slow the pace down. And then this game could definitely become more of a old school slugfest between two defenses that are decent. And we could see, a 23-17 type final score, which could see the Broncos cover, the game go under, the Broncos team total stay under. All these unders could absolutely come through. So one of the paths to getting this game for the Broncos to come out here and play well, if they're not scoring on the defensive side of the ball, right, or setting up great field position, is for the Bills to jump out. Then the Broncos can chase. And if that were to happen, I'd probably say the over for the game more so than the Broncos team total. But just my take on that, the way that would lay out. Okay, I think that covers it. We are, from a longest perspective, we're 22-10 on the season. I'll probably come back with something for next week. Honestly, have not bet anything right now or on the verge of anything that I love from a longest prop perspective. So I'm not going to force those things to you. We've from a client perspective, you guys that are clients know we've only released one game, some props for one game. We're about to release some more for some other games, but hopefully some of what I've shared in this show gives you some thoughts as to some ideas to bet. Obviously, Pam gave some of her bets. Obviously, Joe came in with some of his ref analysis there. I think next week, divisional round, I've got some things that I think have a stronger likelihood from a longest props perspective of hitting. As there's fewer games and the teams are more well-known and the players are more well-known, there just might not be quite as many edges from a props perspective. Now, that being said, I still have a bunch, but even I am going to have far less props than I have had at other weeks, like week 13 or week 14 during the regular season. It's just not even half the number of games being played now. So your overall volume is going to go down, but you're going to have a little bit more time to attack certain matchups. There's still 6 games this week. Next week, there will only be 4 games, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. And so there'll be a little bit more time to dissect those matchups a little bit better. Somebody in the comments earlier mentioned that when the Broncos play on Sunday at 1, they'll already know who they're going to be facing, which most likely is the Baltimore Ravens, right? So Jason asked, when are we getting the pie show? So I did message House, and House was interested. The problem is, from a timing perspective, House wanted to do it like that very week, which was like the week of Christmas. He's like, I could do it this week, but once the playoffs get rolling, it gets a little bit more challenging. What I want to see if I can do with House is I want House to come over here live in studio, and I want us to set up the pies back here, and I want us to hang out side by side and talk to you guys while we're eating the pies and break down some of these games. So I don't want this thing to be too cumbersome, but I would like him to come out here again. He was out here before the season in August, hanging out with me and the family here with a bunch of friends for the crab feast. And so I want him to come out here for the games. I know he's got his other priorities as well as things that he has to do from a contract perspective. So we're going to try to work that out. But whether it's before the divisional games, whether it's before the conference championship games, or whether it's before the Super Bowl, I would love to try to get him out here and us to do some type of a food-based episode right here in this studio, in this office studio, the two of us side by side eating the grub. So that would be a lot of fun. You guys seem to think that would be great. I would love to do that. If you guys have no idea what we're talking about, for years when I was working with House over at the Ringer, every single Thanksgiving time frame, one year it was after Thanksgiving, ahead of Christmas, we would do a pie episode where House would coordinate, because he lives in DC proper. He would coordinate one of his favorite spots. We had a couple different ones that we worked from, and get stuff driven over here, and we would eat the same pies, and we would comment on the pies and talk about the food. But the thing about it was, due to the way that we were running it over there, none of this was on video. So you were listening on the podcast. We had thousands and thousands of you guys listening on the podcast on the Ringer stream, but just hearing us chew the food and talk about how we liked this type of pie, or this one was really savory and tasty, but is still sort of disappointing. Here you get to see it. You get to see our immediate reactions to it. It'd be so much better to do it on video. Yeah, Jack says, got to see the pies. I agree. If you're going to do the pie episode, you need to see the pies live, which would be a ton of fun. So we'll see if we can coordinate that. All right. We have the Tuesday show next week where the college playoff field will be set. I don't know yet if we're getting Ryan on, because when somebody tell me, when is the national championship game for college? Is it next Thursday? Is it next Friday? Monday the 20th. Okay. So on Tuesday, we won't be talking any college. We'll be reacting to these games. On Friday next week, a week from today, we'll be back here with Ryan McChrystal's college best bets for the national championship game. We will also be breaking down the divisional round games. And I said on Tuesday, divisional round used to be my favorite round, because the best two teams, it used to be two teams had buys. The best two teams would re-enter the field and play their games. But now you have this triple day of fun on wild card weekend, doubleheader, triple header, standalone game on Monday night. They used to call it Super Wild Card Weekend, then they stopped calling it Super Wild Card Weekend. But I now think that this weekend might have superseded as my favorite weekend. But that said, divisional round is still one of the best rounds, just because the stakes are so high. You win, you go to the conference championship, which means you're one step away from the Super Bowl. And so that divisional round, with theoretically the four best teams is in each conference, is outstanding to set that stage. And we're going to see the Detroit Lions re-enter the fray. We're going to see the Kansas City Chiefs re-enter the fray. And then the best teams from this weekend, the four best teams from this weekend, re-enter the fray. So I'm really looking forward to next week's show as well. We'll break all those games down on Friday. But thank you guys for participating in the chat. Thank you guys for subscribing to the Sharp Football Analysis Show over there on YouTube. If you'd like to get on board, we are giving you $25 this week is all you need for our subscription. Use show 75. It takes 75% off, drops the price down to only $25 for this week. So get involved if you want to get all the picks from tonight's college football playoff game all the way through until the wild card games on Sunday. We will see you guys on Tuesday, live, noon Eastern time, on YouTube, on X. Best of luck in all your bets. We'll see you guys then. Go,